Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast edition at Shishing University. I'm your host, Roland, and today I would like to chat with three marvelous expats living in Taiwan. And during the podcast, we'll be talking about their experiences living in Taiwan. We'll cover different aspects of life here in Taiwan. So first, I would like to.
Well, wait, Roland, don't we need a name for the podcast?
Okay.
First, can I suggest something?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest three idiots living in Taiwan.
Okay, do our panelists agree?
I would like to make a grammatical correction or a stylistic correction. It should be three idiots in Taiwan. We don't need the living.
Okay.
Okay.
I accept three idiots in Taiwan.
I accept that. It's the greatest title ever for any podcast.
Okay, thank you. All right, so three idiots in Taiwan.
三白痴在台湾
Oh,
对吗
good Mandarin, yes. So I would like to ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves so that our audience can know who you are. So let's start from Donovan.
Okay, so of course I'm Donovan. I'm from South Africa. I will have been in Taiwan for 25 years this coming February. I'm teaching here at SHU, and I'm married to a great Taiwanese man, and most importantly, I have 5 beautiful cats. And that's me.
That's great. Yes, thank you, Donovan. I love your cats too.
Thank you. They should be loved.
And next, let's invite Darren for his self-introduction.
Hi, my name's Darren, and I've been in Taiwan for 27, 28-ish years. I came when I was 29, and I've been here teaching at Shishing for 15 years. And I'm also married to a Taiwanese woman, wonderful Taiwanese woman, and enjoy my time here in Taiwan.
Yep. Thank you, Darren. Sounds good. And last but not least, let's welcome Kevin.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kevin. I'm from the UK. I've been in Taiwan since 2003, which is nearly 22 years. Been working at Shushin since 2015, which is about 10 years, and I'm married to a Taiwanese woman, a different Taiwanese woman to Darren. I have 2 children, 2 cats, and
That's what I
Some
forgot
tea.
to mention. I have no cats.
I didn't know.
Why?
I didn't know that Kevin had cats.
oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely a cat person.
Yeah, but he only has 2. I have 5.
Yeah, but it's the best 2.
Yeah. Maybe he's getting there.
Yeah, we'll talk about this later.
Right. Okay, so again, I'm Roland, and I graduated from Shishing University in 2016. I spent 5 years studying here because I went on an exchange program to the United States, and I thoroughly enjoy my time here at the university. I had the opportunity to take Donovan and Darren's classes. I think it was intermediate English and advanced English. And again, I'm glad to be leading this podcast today. So first question I'd like to pose here to our panelists is experiences about the culture shock. Because when you go to a different place, like you've all been in Taiwan for a number of years now, but I'm pretty certain that when you first came to the island, you experienced some form of culture shock. And I would just like to invite you to share with us what are some of the most significant or noticeable differences that you observed upon landing on the island. So does anyone want to answer? Kevin, perhaps? Is there anything on your mind?
Culture shock. I'd say the big thing was food, because Taiwanese food is so different to British food. So I had like British food's a lot heavier and a lot stodgier and a lot more unhealthy, and the flavour's a lot stronger. So when I first came to Taiwan, finding stuff to eat that I really liked was really hard. I ate a lot of McDonald's. I used to eat I used to get like clam soup, but I wouldn't eat the clams because they scared me a little bit because I'd never had a clam before. So I'd just drink the soup and then leave all the clams and still be really hungry.
Are the clams not that common in England?
No, I mean they're expensive in England.
Okay.
I never ate a clam until I came to Taiwan.
Okay. And how did the McDonald's taste?
Same.
Any different?
The same.
Smaller sizes of the portions there?
I think isn't it universal? I don't know.
Okay.
I was hungry, so
It didn't matter.
yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. All right. How about Darren? Anything that stood out to you in particular when you first arrived?
Yeah, so I've been in Taiwan a long time, 27, 28 years, but it's not my first time coming to Taiwan. I came here in 1986, I think, when I was 19 years old, and it was the first foreign country I ever traveled to outside of Canada and America. And I had all kinds of culture shock about everything. And what I think of as kind of simple culture shock, like, oh my God, is that a toilet? How do I use that? And I had lots of problems like that, but kind of simple problems. And now I'm married, I have a Taiwanese family, I have in-laws, and my problems continue, but they're much more intricate and require deeper understanding of Taiwanese culture to understand how I'm getting everything wrong.
I like how you mentioned the toilet,
Uh-huh.
the so-called toilets that we have here in Taiwan. I believe people like to call it the squatting pit because it's not technically a toilet to most Westerners, and it certainly can be something that you need to get used to. And I also like how you mentioned when you marry into a Taiwanese family, you kind of get those intricacies figured out and slowly acclimated to life here.
Well, I have
somehow.
dreams of that happening.
Okay.
One day.
One day, yeah. Would you like a story?
If we have time.
I don't know.
Or do you want to
Yeah.
tell us briefly? Yeah.
Do you have a story?
I have endless stories, but here's one explaining what I mean. So when I was engaged to my now wife, we were getting close to the engagement party or the formal tea ceremony thing. And her father called me to their house to talk to me a day or two before this was meant to happen. And Venus, that's my wife, she became very, very nervous. She knew something was coming. I didn't. And on that day, I went to her family's place and I went to talk to her father. And in my Canadian head, I expected to have a conversation about what I think are important marriage issues, family, children, love, things like that. And I went there and I was talking with my father-in-law, and he was mostly talking and speaking Chinese. And my Chinese, it's not great. And at that time, it really wasn't great, but I could kind of follow along, you know. And I'm listening to him and listening to him and listening to him. And he's an old man, and he's like really an LKK, you know, he's like old style communication. And he would have, I gotta see a picture of myself, he would have a point here. This is the point he wanted to make. And he would start circling around and around and around and almost come to the point, and then he'd go off over here and start circling around again in Chinese. And I understood. I was listening to him, and I was like, yeah. But I never understood his point. I just understood the words. And this went on for 2 hours. And at the end of it, like, I asked my wife, she was sitting in the room. I asked my wife, like, what happened? What were we talking about? She's like, oh, nobody knows. Doesn't matter. And so, like, for me, as an English speaker, I just can't relate to that, because English, you have a point and you just go straight to it. And during that, event. He didn't talk about any of the things I expected him to talk about. I thought we'd talk about love, children, family name, whatever. And so like he would ask me questions like, how can you assure my daughter's future happiness? And I would answer with things like, well, I promise that I will love her with all my heart. And I just remembered that I said that in Chinese and I screwed it up. And I said, instead of saying I will love her with all my heart, Xing, I said I will love her with all my sex, which is what? Xing?
Nice.
Yeah, it's often.
Different tones there.
Different tone, same word. Which, you know, let's be fair. I did not invent this language. That's not my fault. But yeah, so I expected this kind of conversation, talking about love and marriage and the nature of love and marriage. And he kept asking me all these questions about how I was going to make his daughter happy and assure her contentedness and stuff like that. And I just kept talking about love and closeness and togetherness. And I could see he was getting angry. And he's like getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I couldn't understand why. And then finally, my wife leans over and goes, he's asking you about money. How much money do you have? How much money are you going to give me? And I was like, oh, yeah, not in my head at all. So, cultural differences.
Well, obviously, money was very high on his priority list at the time.
Yeah, well, yeah. His point was, can you count love? I said, well, no.
I guess he wanted to equate love with monetary things. Or
yeah, he cared more about practical things and very traditional, you know, like very old style.
But I think you made a good point about how in Asian cultures, often people like to beat around the bush instead of getting directly to the point. So sometimes you kind of circumnavigate a certain central idea, but you never get people to understand what you truly want to express.
Yeah, it's what do you call it? High context language.
Right. But 2 hours, wow, that was a...
Yeah, at least 2 hours of kind of sitting and listening to him circle around, not really understanding what's happening. And I look back at it and I'm not sure how much I really understood because my wife had to explain a lot of it to me and she didn't understand a lot of it, which amazes me.
And maybe it was a ceremonial thing that he needed to do just to see his future son-in-law.
The ceremonial part actually came like a day and a half later. This was let's just make sure he has money, I guess.
Okay. to ensure the so-called financial stability there.
Yeah, that's right. To make sure everything's copacetic.
Okay. Thank you, Darren, for that wonderful story.
Sure.
And last but not least, let's get to Donovan, because I'm sure Donovan has a lot to contribute to this discussion of experiencing culture shock when you first came from South Africa.
Okay, culture shock, I think, is a complicated topic. It's very real. But culture shock does not always mean you're like in shock and screaming. Sometimes it happens very slowly. And people are they're thinking we're not suffering from culture shock, but they're never going out in Taiwan. They're just sitting at home every night watching TV because they're too scared to go out. That's another form of culture shock. So that's one thing I want to say about culture shock. I don't remember feeling culture shock in any majorly big way when I arrived because I was just, okay, look, I come from South Africa. South Africa's fucked up and has its problems. Taiwan's fucked up and has its problems. It just seemed to be changing one confusing world for another one. And I just appreciated all the good and bad things in my old country at home and all the good and bad things in my new country. But one small example of culture shock I would like to talk about, or a pet peeve that I have is, I've got one of my favorite t-shirts at home says, "Tell your children not to point at me." And I cannot understand why when I'm walking down the street, a little kid is allowed to point me out to his mother and say, Weigerin.
No, Adoa.
And his mother does not correct him and say, that is impolite. That is not done. Where I come from in South Africa, my mother would have taught me, you don't point at anybody that looks different. You don't make comments about people in wheelchairs. You don't make comments about people that are black. You don't make comments about people that look different from you. But in Taiwan, it's normal for little kids to say, oh, Weigerin, it's exciting. And I just wish their mothers, because where do the kids learn it from? Well, they learn it from their families, that it's all right to say other people are different like that. And yeah, I suppose it's just a pet peeve, and it just ties in with what I feel to be Taiwanese racism. I love Taiwan, but many of my Taiwanese friends feel that Taiwan is not racist at all, and that is a spectacularly big lie. The way Taiwan feels about black people, the way Taiwan feels about people from the Philippines who come here to be caregivers, the way people feel about a lighter skin is just shocking. So I suppose I come from a country where we're very sensitive about cultural differences. And me and my friends, at least, are very careful not insulting people because of those differences. And I feel a little bit of shock in Taiwan that people aren't kinder to people of other groups.
Well, that's an interesting thing that you
Sorry,
shared.
I didn't mean to get that serious that quickly. But
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So again, I've been here a long time, but during my first trip in the 1980s, like we went all around the island. I was a student here. I was studying folk religion, and we went all around the island looking at temples and stuff like that. And then, of course, in the evenings we went out. We were a group of relatively young people, 19, 20, 21. And one time, as a group of, I don't know, maybe 4 of us together, we went out to a dance club. And at that time in Taiwan, they had a lot of like taxi dance clubs and questionable dance clubs anyway. And it was a culture, and it was a thing that was happening a lot. And we went to this dance club, and it was all dark like a dance club would be. And we walked in the door, and you know, the music was playing, people were dancing, and we walked in the door, and the music stopped. Everyone turned and looked at us, and the lights came on, and everyone just kind of looked at us for, I don't know, a minute or so. And then the lights went down, and the music started, and people started dancing again. I miss that. I really do. Like when I went back to Canada and I walked into a bar and I was like, I'm here, and no one gave a shit. But, you know.
Yeah, I think especially a long time ago here in Taiwan, people were kind of so surprised to see Caucasians, especially Caucasians, just like you, Donovan and Darren mentioned, how they would walk around and people would kind of revere them or...
Well, like at that time, I didn't see any white people except when I specifically went to a college and went to talk to a white teacher that was in Taichung, and I think I saw one in Taipei. And other than that, it was just us. That's all I ever saw for any other racial group. And at that time, this actually did annoy me. You would be walking down the street and someone would come and walk behind you and just like start an English conversation, like, hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? And you're walking and they're like behind you just going, hi, how are you? How are you? Hello, it's good to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm fine. And I'm just like, what? It feels very aggressive, even though it really wasn't.
Right. There needn't be that interaction. But I think just it's the idea that it's rare to see a Caucasian walking about on the street. So rare things stand out to people. And a lot of people kind of had this idea of, oh, you know English, so you should approach an English speaker or supposedly an English speaker and start a conversation with them. But they don't know that not everyone is willing or has the time to start a conversation or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you meant by aggression.
I do not. Okay. Maybe later we're going to talk about advice we would give to our students to improve their English. I do not encourage my students to speak to other foreigners. Yeah. Unless it's in a relaxed setting in a club and they're all getting together. But I've been approached in a park by a lady who said, "Oh, can I practice my English with you?" And I'm like, "No, that's my job."
Right. I think a lot of people, they don't realize that when roles reversed, if somebody were to approach me and say, "Oh, could I practice Chinese with you?" That would seem odd to me as well.
I wouldn't even mind that. That's quite polite, actually. But just kind of, tailing me, going blah 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 blah, like what's happening. And to give you another example of how it seems hostile, even though I know it wasn't hostile, and this hasn't happened for years. I'm talking about a long time ago, so 1985 or 1986. When I was here as a student, we went to the National Palace Museum. And while I was in there, of course, there were lots of school children. And as I'm walking through the National Palace Museum, every room I went into, like 45 or 50 school children would just come and, start talking to me. And like they're little children. Of course, it's not aggressive, but it was scary. It's like, it gives you a sense of why you don't want to be a movie star or something like that.
Right. Sometimes it's an issue of privacy and just keeping a distance and not.
It's like,
you don't necessarily want that celebrity feel.
Yeah.
Kevin, has anything ever happened to you in regard to being approached by someone or having to start a conversation with someone wanting to practice their English?
I mean, I'll get people, not in a while, but yeah, definitely people who come up and just be like in my face, like, "Hi, how are you? What do you do? Blah blah blah." And I'm trying to politely just walk away from the conversation. Be like, "Oh yeah, great, yeah, see you around, bye bye," and they just keep coming at me.
Kevin, that's just because you're so handsome.
And perhaps
Not the culture thing.
perhaps when they strike up a conversation with you, they're immediately mesmerized by your British accent.
I don't think they're even listening to me, to be honest. I think they're just talking as much English as they can at me, and maybe they're mesmerized by my looks and my accent, but I think they're just a bit crazy, actually.
Right, because a lot of people here, they really do admire and revere and think highly of a British accent. They think it's the Queen's, the so-called Queen's English, and that's why I asked that question.
It can make you sound smarter than you really are.
Okay, so for me though, I like to share, because I study in the States. I represented the university as an international student, and I studied in America for a semester. It was a short time, but I didn't really experience culture shock. It's just, I got a taste of a different kind of American English, because I was in one of the airports there in Michigan, and I wanted to ask for internet access, and I tried to talk to an African American, but little did I know that they had a very different accent from the usual, I guess, Midwestern accent I grew up with listening to. So I was shocked that I didn't understand practically a word or two of what the person was trying to say to me. So that caught me off guard, because before I went to the States, I was confident that I would be able to communicate in English, but I didn't realize different accents also existed in different parts of the United States. So that kind of was the thing that caught me off guard. But the food and everything else was fine to me. Yeah. But my reverse culture shock was great. Yeah. When I came back to Taiwan, I wasn't used to people talking in Chinese and everything written in Chinese. Did any of you ever experience the so-called reverse culture shock when you revisited your home country after staying here in Taiwan for a while or an extended period of time?
Of course.
Yes, Donovan.
I mean, it's kind of getting. I don't drive. I don't drive a car. So Taiwan is very convenient for me. Public transport. And for me to get to South Africa and to realize there is not a 7-Eleven that is 24 hours on every corner, it blows my mind. How inconvenient. I'm used to in Taiwan, I can wake up in the middle of the night, go buy anything I want from a 7-Eleven, mail things, receive mail, buy my train tickets, and there's nothing like that in South Africa. So yeah, I just go back and think, wow, these people are backward.
A lot of people are so amazed by the universality of convenience stores here on the island, where you could do everything practically 24/7. And I think the important thing is you can also be safe and not be robbed or be in any sort of danger. I think that's another key point there. But good point, Donovan. Kevin, anything?
I guess it's similar, like convenience stores, public transport, or working healthcare system.
Oh, that's big.
Safety. I mean, with shops, like especially like my mother lives in a village in rural Cambridgeshire, and Sundays the shops are closed. Most weekdays they close at 6, apart from one shop that stays open till 8. And like once it hits that time of the night, like in Taiwan, like especially Taipei, it's not just the convenience stores. You can go to night markets, you can go to clubs, you can get all different sorts of places. Something is happening somewhere. There's 24-hour fruit shops. If you want to buy a really good apple, you can just like 3 o'clock in the morning, you can go and it's there. But in rural Cambridgeshire, everything kind of stops at 6 o'clock, and everyone kind of like sits at home and watches TV or watches their phones. It's just kind of, it's very quiet.
Yeah, the transportation is also big. And
Oh God, yeah.
I know I rely on public transportation, commuting to work, going different places. Darren, anything that stood out to you?
Sure. I agree with everything they said. Like I feel all those things when I go home. But I don't go home that often. And to my actual hometown is called Saskatoon, and I haven't been there for years and years because my parents had moved and I would visit them in Victoria, a different city in Canada. And recently I went back to Saskatoon. I hadn't been there for, 6 or 7 years. And so it's like I was cryogenically frozen and then suddenly woken up in Saskatoon 6 or 7 years later, and everything had changed 98% in a negative way. And so like the level of violence, the level of homelessness and poverty and all these things that I saw really shocked me. And coming from here, and terrible healthcare and all that, and coming from here, it really surprised me. So that kind of deeper reverse culture shock, yes, I've had, but I've also had a really simple kind of reverse culture shock that's still find it funny. The first time I traveled to Asia, which was to Taiwan, and then I went back to Canada, and I went back to my hometown, Saskatoon, which is a farming community, really, and it's flat plains for hundreds of miles, thousands of miles actually, and not many tall buildings, and say 6 or 7 floor building would be considered like a skyscraper. And so when I got off the plane in Saskatoon, I started walking around. I kept thinking that they had knocked down buildings. Or, when you get new glasses and you put on your new glasses and it feels like all the buildings fell down. That's what it felt like. I was walking around, I felt like I had new glasses and all the buildings had laid flat on the ground. And that was my first reverse culture shock.
Wow. I didn't realize the poverty issue here in Taiwan until I went to the States and I visited Philadelphia, and I would see so many people out on the streets just asking people for money. And before I went to the United States, I always thought that well, everything is like so romanticized and people want to go there and they want to start a new and rich life. But when you go there, you really see how people who are disadvantaged live really poor lives, and it is an issue.
Yeah.
I guess it is an issue worldwide, and I never knew that in Canada it is also an issue.
It has become more so over the last, say, 10 years or so.
Okay.
But I've been outside Canada, so when I see that, it just really, I'm like surprised by it.
And I don't want to say I'm better than the rest of you, but just to say, if we're talking about crime and poverty, of course South Africa wins.
Yes.
So much crime because there is so much poverty. So I want my Taiwanese students to realize how lucky they are to be as safe in Taiwan, to be able to walk through parks and to travel places at night without being scared of mugged or being attacked or shot by a gun. So just to agree with my two amazing colleagues, yes, safety, so important. And the national health insurance in Taiwan is amazing. My last trip back to South Africa, I ended up in the hospital for kidney stones. It was a terrifying experience. The Taiwanese medical system is so much cleaner and so much more giving to people.
Yeah, South Africa is a country that most of us here in Taiwan don't really know much about. So I'm glad you could bring some perspective to the condition there and how it's relatively safe to live in Taiwan. And the national health insurance is also big. I know a lot of people, they live overseas from Taiwan and they come back to Taiwan just to get their medical things settled. And that's really a benefit to people who want to settle here long term. And for me though, when I was in the States, I didn't feel like there was anything. I guess I saw poverty, and I also saw a lot of open fields and the people there, and I didn't think it was dangerous, probably because I was staying in a rural part of the country. We were in central mountainous Pennsylvania, and the people there were so kind, and you could leave your laptop out on the desk for a few nights and it's still there. So I didn't really see so much danger, but I wanted to visit New York, and a lot of people discouraged me from doing so because they said that it would be dangerous to travel there alone as a visitor, as an international visitor, and not accompanied by anyone else. And I also heard that when you get to certain parts of the city, it could be dangerous. It could be more dangerous if you don't know your way. And that really surprised me because it's not the case here in Taiwan. You can venture out in the middle of the night in the wee hours and you would be fine most of the time. Yes. And yeah, thank you for sharing. And speaking of the language, I also like to talk about the language barrier, because when you go to a different place, and for the three of you, obviously Mandarin was not a language that you were acquainted with growing up, at least in the formative years. So what are some of your experiences having to perhaps understand Mandarin or use it in your day-to-day interactions with people? Could I get something from Kevin?
Well, you know, my early experiences or my day-to-day or my...
Yeah, so when you first got here, I'm sure you encountered a lot of Chinese. People would talk to you in Chinese, or maybe you would have to read some signs.
I mean, the first one, the one I remember is actually Taiwanese. When I first came here, I was teaching little kids, tiny little kids. I don't know if I was allowed to teach little kids at that time, whatever. Probably. Yeah, edit that bit out. I was teaching humans.
Been there, done that.
And there was this one little girl called Winnie who always used to come up to me and go, ha, Kong, 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 at me. I used to think, oh, that's really cute. And then after about a month, I found out she was calling me an idiot.
Oh, right.
She said it in such a sweet way.
Exactly. We say it that way in Taiwanese. That's right.
Yeah.
It means idiotic in some way.
But I learned the word So I guess that's good. I don't know.
Okay. You saw it as a learning experience.
I thought she was just being sweet to me. I thought, oh, what a lovely little kid coming up and smiling. Oh,
Okay.
idiot.
That's a little something. That's funny. And Darren, anything that you can think of?
My whole life is a language problem. But I'm trying to think of simple little stories. And, I had one and I lost it. Okay, again, when I first came here, so very long ago, they, instead of saying, hey, you, right, they say, hey, 帅哥. And it's not so common anymore, right? But I asked someone, what does that mean? And the guy goes, well, it means, handsome man. And so for a whole month that I was here, I was just like, oh God, I'm so hot. Everyone's calling me 帅哥. Every time I turn around, 帅哥. And I failed to understand that it was essentially just a fake pronoun. But I have kind of a lot of stories like that.
Yeah, I think people tend to address you as that, especially when they want you as their prospective customer. Like when you go to a drink shop or a restaurant, and I guess the servers there, they might address you by some polite terms, hoping that you would contribute to their revenue.
Yeah.
In a way. So that's something that I think it still happens though. When I visit breakfast shops, I'm a local here now. When I visit breakfast shops, I still see those older shop owners. They still address you by
帅哥.
handsome guy or beautiful woman or something like that. Yeah. So I think it's still existent. It's just not that common.
Yeah.
Right. And Donovan, anything?
Well, I'm pissed off because I never got all that Schweiger,
You just haven't encountered the right people.
Clearly. Okay, now my Chinese language skills are not as good as these two other guys. So I just have and that's to my embarrassment. I just have a few phrases I know how to say, like, 我不明白你说什么.
Okay, obviously I don't understand.
Can you translate that?
Right, sure. I don't understand what you mean.
Exactly. But now, that's one of the phrases I know. But once you tell that to people, they think, oh, well, he's speaking in Chinese, so he must understand. And they keep on speaking to you in Chinese.
Oh,
Anyway, my experience of language is there is so much you can do, even if you communicating, even if you don't understand each other's languages. I don't understand it when I go to a McDonald's and I want to order a burger and a young lady behind the counter will giggle because she's, it's a Weigerin coming to order and I don't speak English. Why is she so embarrassed? I can point to the picture and say exactly what I want. So my experience is learning how to communicate what I want without using verbal language.
right. You can survive because 90%, people say that 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So you don't need to use language to communicate. And you can use very simple language. Just like you say, you could just say, I want meal number 1, meal number 2, and this and that. So I agree. And I know Donovan has managed to survive here very well without knowing Mandarin, right? Knowing just little Mandarin, you can still get what you want most of the time. Yeah,
It's still my goal to learn more.
right. It's in your long-term plan.
It's the new year now.
Right.
Is
Is it one of your resolutions?
It's one of my New Year resolutions. Learn some Chinese every day.
Okay. I just like to share one expat that has shared with me his experiences here in Taiwan. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Taipei Metro and how different station names are written in Romanized spellings and words. And he once shared with me, I think this is hilarious, when he first came to Taiwan and he had no idea how to pronounce those station names because of them. A lot of them were taken directly from Chinese, translated, right? And you know, there's a station named Dongmen, right? It is on the red line and it's very close to a shopping area. And he would always remember it by Dongman because it never occurred to him that it had to be pronounced that certain way. Or on the blue line, there's a station, it's called Jiangzicui. It's near Banqiao, but it's so hard to pronounce that he would remember it by jacuzzi. So he would find these associations of words that he already knew, and he would somehow try to make it out. And of course, on the brown line, there's Wende. But in English, we never really pronounce that way. So he always remembered it by Wendy. So when you get to Wendy, you have to do something. And so it was these associations that he came up with that helped him understand a little bit of Taiwanese culture and how words are translated between languages. And I think that's interesting. So
Roland,
yes.
I was just going to add a couple more stories that Donovan made me think of.
Sure, Darren.
So this actually happened when I first got here to live here, so 28 years ago or something like that. I was walking on the street in Taipei and I saw a scooter driver get hit by a car. And I went running up to him to try and help him because he's, laying on the pavement. And as he saw this Waigua ran coming running up to him, he started crawling away on his back. He's like, I don't speak English. And I was like, I just want to phone the ambulance. I just want to help you. He's like, no. So there's that level of fear of English in Taipei at that time. And I think you have to go to the countryside now to experience that.
Right. It's not so much of a big thing because people are, I think, more internationalized and they understand that English is a common part of everyday life. But it's interesting that you mentioned how you wanted to save someone and they were just resisting your help.
I mean, I think he had a broken leg and he was just kind of like a crab crawling away from me. I'm like, wait, stop.
Wow. Well, he must have been really scared.
Yes, definitely. Big white guy coming out of nowhere. He's just like, oh my God, my day just can't get worse.
Wow, that's an interesting little story.
Yeah, in terms of Chinese language, like when I first came here and started studying language, everyone I talked to would be in Chinese, would say, oh my God, your Chinese is so great. It's so wonderful. It's so great. And of course it wasn't. And when I started to reach a point where I would talk to people and they go, oh my God, your Chinese sucks. That's when I knew I was making progress. And I hope someday to go back to it's great, but I'm still in the it sucks area.
I'm sure you're learning more and more. And it's the new year, like Donovan says, so it could be on your list of New Year's resolutions for 2025. Yes. And we're having a great time discussing life here in Taiwan, but I think we're going to take a little break and we will come back in a few and discuss the other points here on my list.
All right, cool.
Okay, excellent. See you soon.
Your water must be coming, right?